I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah. That is what I heard them say way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, yeah, we have sorely changed. Whoa. Eh, eh, whoa. See, I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah. That is what I heard them say, yeah. Way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave, yeah, before I become a slave, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, we have sorely changed. Whoa. Eh, eh. Whoa, oh, 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 oh. Whoa, oh, 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 oh.
And now, live from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you're watching My Fellow Americans with your host, Spike
Yes!
Cohen.
Yes! It's me, I'm back! Yes, thank you! Thank you! Thank you so much. Thank you. Keep clapping. Clap for the miracle. How would we know that you want the miracle if you didn't keep clapping? Welcome to My Fellow Americans. I am literally Spike Cohen. I am back and I'm ready to go. I've missed you all and I'm so excited to bring you this program tonight. Tonight's episode, by the way, is more Jewish than a sale on for rent signs. Huh? 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 Yeah, this is a Muddy Waters Media production. Check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Anchor, Twitter, Periscope, iTunes, Google Play, Float, everywhere. Actually, just check us out on Float and Anchor. Leave Facebook, Instagram, YouTube forever. Treat them like MySpace. Just leave them forever and join us on Float and Anchor. They are actually free in that you don't have to pay for them and they won't censor you. And you can donate money and crypto to us on them. So join us at all of those things. Be sure to like us, follow us, 5-star us, or 10-star us. Whatever the maximum number of stars that you can give us on your given platform of choice, be sure to do that maximum number of stars. If there's a bell there, like on YouTube, hit the bell. If there's anything you have to hit that. Just be sure to hit and like and rate and do whatever else and share us and swipe right on us. Be sure to share this video right now. The last thing I want is for your closest friends and loved ones to miss out on a roughly hour-long libertarian podcast on a Wednesday evening. Give the gift of Spike Cohen today. Kids love it. This program is brought to you by Anchor FM, which I will be plugging later on in this program, probably roughly halfway through, hopefully at an incredibly inappropriate moment. The intro and outro music is brought to you by the amazing and talented Mr. Joe Davi. That's Jodavi. Check him out on Facebook, SoundCloud. Go to his Bandcamp, Joe Davi Music, Jodavimusic. Forgot to spell music. Bandcamp.com. Buy his entire discography. It's like $15. You will love it. I would like to thank Kroger for this delicious, purified drinking water that I drink on this and every episode of My Fellow Americans. Absolutely. That is definitely purified water. Bulavanaka. I would like to thank my guest tonight, actually, for this sweet-ass gear I'm wearing. You can get this sweet-ass Taxation is Theft hat and a bunch of other stuff by going to taxationistheft.cards. And you can get these equally sweet-ass wristbands at Berman2020.com, Behrman 2020.com. This one says, End the Drug War. And it's got weed leaves on it because I'm super edgy. And then this one says, Taxation is Theft. Be sure to go there and get those today. What else? Shout out to Taron Turks' mom and him as always. Guys, before I introduce my guest tonight, I need to bring up two incredibly important things. First of all, it has finally happened. The Libertarian Dad-Bod calendar has arrived, and I look just amazing. You can have this sexy photo and 11 other photos of slightly less sexy libertarian men, except for Tom Arnold, who is actually more sexy than me. But you can have all of us hanging from your fridge or wherever you hang sexy men for the low, low price of only $17, which I believe even includes shipping. You can literally have this shipped to your doorstep, mailbox, or wherever they ship sexy men to you, sexy libertarian men, for only $17. Your donation of $17 will go to the campaigns of Libertarian Party candidates. Just go to libertariandadbod.com and you can have this today. And if you decide to donate $30, I will sign your copy. We'll figure that out, how I'll do that, but I will sign your copy with whatever you want it to say. And if you donate $1,000, I will come to your house and recreate each of these poses for you and then sign it. I'll sign myself. Just $1,000. And then also, the Libertarian Party is just chock. This is the second thing. The Libertarian Party is just chock full of caucuses. Most of them, or many of them, I shouldn't say most of them, many of them are just utterly pointless and useless. I've decided to put an end to all of this silliness by starting my own caucus, the Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus. Our purpose is to share the message of liberty, community, and waffles. So if you care about waffles and at least one of those other two things, be sure to sign up to the Libertarian Waffle House Caucus today. The link is in the show notes, or you can just search in Facebook for the Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus. So I hope to see you there. Guys, my guest tonight is an absolute legend. He is an international speaker. He is a software engineer who has worked with many Fortune 500 companies. He is a political strategist who has helped countless libertarian campaigns and activists, and he is currently running for the Libertarian Party nomination for President of these United States. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans, please welcome to the show Mr. Dan Taxation is Theft Berman. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Welcome. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm jumping between my podcast and your podcast. Welcome to my podcast.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, welcome to the Dan. Welcome me to the Dan Taxation is
I'm going to welcome you to your own podcast. How's
welcome to my own podcast, everyone. I don't know what's happening anymore. Hey, everyone. Welcome to wherever you are listening to the two of us on the internet. Dan, I'm really honored to have you on.
I got one for you.
Okay.
Two Jews walk into a podcast. That's it. I didn't have the rest of it yet.
No, but it's true. It's really just a statement of fact. Two Jews
literally. Can we say literally?
Literally.
Did we literally walk into a podcast?
I actually walked in here. So two Jews walk into two podcasts. I'm really honored to have you on. When you went on my co-host Matt Wright's show, The Writer's Block, I was like, man, that was so good. I better wait an acceptable amount of time to make it seem like I'm not totally jealous that you were on his show first. And now here you are.
Well, you just spilled the beans.
Yeah, but I didn't. Oh. Oh, wow.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make it that kind of a show. I'm not going to call you on your bullshit every other second.
No, you probably should, because so far this show has just been pure id. And I really need like someone to come in and say, no, this has to stop. And it took you. And I appreciate that. So thank you for coming on. Guys, be sure to comment with your questions and thoughts. I'm also talking to Dan's podcast listeners too. You guys be sure to comment with your questions and thoughts. Wherever you see us on the internet, be sure to comment with your questions and thoughts. And Dan and I will tell you if you are right or wrong. Now, Dan, this is both your first time on my show and my first time on your show.
On your show. Your first time on my show on your show.
This is your first time on my show on your show, Dan. So
I'll buy that.
Okay, so because of that, the first thing I always ask my guests is to tell us a little story, a ditty, if you will, a Dan ditty, about who you are and how you came about to be a libertarian. Was it an aha moment or kind of a gradual evolution? Tell us your Dan ditty.
Man, well, I've been trying to tell this story before, and then it hit me the other day. I've been telling it all wrong.
Okay.
The story that I've been telling is where I grew up and where I moved, and saw these, learned about libertarianism, learned about Ron Paul, all this stuff, which is great. But then I realized, I think a more true statement about why I'm doing this and how I got into this. Sorry, my dogs are a little bit
fine.
yappy
I
tonight.
love dogs.
Has more to do with, I saw my friends, my family, people who were close to me, people who weren't close to me, but who I could see were wronged by this system.
Right.
Whether it's the police, the laws, the taxes, the wars, all this stuff. I see it and I'm like, I just can't sit and watch this. I got to do something about this.
Right.
It's absolutely immoral that any of this stuff is going on. And nobody seems, well, I say nobody, not literally nobody, figuratively nobody seems to be doing anything about it. And I know there are a lot of great people in the Libertarian Party who are trying to do something about it. And, I got to bring my own flavor to it and do as much as I can to help, help what everyone else is doing along, and just, be another soldier in the fight against all this injustice.
Very cool. Very cool. Now that brings us to your presidential campaign. Now I was at the South Carolina Libertarian Party convention and debate. Not only was I there for your speech, I was literally the closest human being to you during your speech. I was like right up at the front with my camera. So I have that distinction going for me, which is nice. And if I were smart, I'd have that video showing right now, but I didn't think to put that there until this very moment. So Dan, on both of our shows at the same time, I would like to say to you that during that speech, it was interesting because I absolutely loved it. You talked about traveling internationally without papers, not paying taxes, how we shouldn't even be paying taxes, and you kind of broke that down about how the IRS definition of who is a worker and so forth. It felt like a really great motivational speech about how you set yourself free and how we could all do the same. Is that kind of like how you try to present it?
Yeah. I mean, it's, every time I go somewhere else, I speak a little bit differently on different subjects.
Right.
And, so but I will say that, I have had that in my history. I have been kind of a seminar junkie. I came from being pretty unmotivated, or I don't want to say, I came from like an interesting past of, trying to figure out, okay, how do I start a business? I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but how do I actually make this happen? How do I get motivated enough? How do I learn all these skills that I need in order to become a successful entrepreneur? So
Right.
I was a seminar junkie for a while, learned lots and lots of great things. And I really feel that, in the reason that a lot of those programs work are actually very interesting because of, you have a lot of information, you have to get it to people, but you also want to get people to, like, you don't want them to just get the information so they can recite it later. People need to become active, and they need to be, especially when we talk about the Libertarian Party and people who are in this movement, and people who we want to support this campaign. You got to get active. You need to become inspired. You need to be motivated, and you need to want to make change in the world.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of, maybe where a little bit of that comes from.
Cool. Yeah, no, it was amazing. And I want to ask, there are some who run for president under the Libertarian Party and maybe under other parties as well. But I noticed a lot with the LP, there seem to be kind of two groups of people. There are those that are running because they're actually like trying to be elected president, and then others who sort of use it as a vehicle to spread their message about freedom and liberty. Like they're sort of using that earned media attention they can get from it to spread that message. would you say that you're doing one or the other? Is it that you really want to be inaugurated as president in January of 2021? Or is this primarily about spreading the message to people that they should be free? Or is it kind of a combination of both?
I think it's really a combination of both. I mean, if you were to ask, do I want to be president? The answer is kind of no. But am I willing to be president to fix a lot of the injustice in this country and in the world? Then the answer is absolutely yes. And what people like, people seem to like, they want to differentiate that, right? Like, is it like, are you in this to teach liberty and spread it, or are you in this to get elected?
Right.
And that's the same thing. No libertarian is going to get elected until people understand what a libertarian is and want that.
Right.
And so
right.
you don't get to that until you educate people and you get them on board. And this is a really important part of this, because I know a lot of people think that educating people on libertarianism means going out and teaching them economics and teaching them all this other stuff. That's really not it.
Right.
Really, the idea is, and this is what we're doing with the campaign. We've been really successful. I mean, we've got Trump supporters and Bernie Sanders supporters and all kinds of ex-Democrats and ex-military and ex-police and everything else supporting this campaign. It's not by saying, here's why we need to end the Fed.
Right.
It's really by saying, look, what do you see as a problem in the world? And once you understand what they see as a problem in the world, you connect the dots and say, this is how libertarianism is going to fix that problem. And it's not watering it down. It's not pandering. It's none of that. It's finding out how to communicate the message to them. And once you have that, you have a really strong connection, and you can teach them libertarianism. And a couple of months later, you might be teaching them why they should end the Fed. But you need to make sure you get your foot in the door at the right place, and every person has a different need in their life, and that's where you need to start.
Right. Most people aren't like, they're busy worrying about making ends meet and things like that, and they're not necessarily as cerebral as we are, where us walking up to them and going, well, yeah, I understand that, you're worried about, how your kids are going to get into college and, get ahead in life and how you're going to pay down your credit card debt. But have you ever thought of reading Rothbard? Because you should totally read Rothbard. Like, they're not going to get that. They're going to get you giving that empowering message of saying, here's why the state and coercive entities and central planning are harming you, and here's how it's specifically to the problems that you're stating you have, and here's how libertarianism could fix that.
Exactly.
So, yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And there we go, that's my screen. To that end, you do talk about ending the Fed. You talk about canceling government debts and ending the drug war, ending all the wars, transforming the federal government into, this is what I wanted to ask you about. You talk about transforming the federal government into, as you put it, quote unquote, one that interacts with its citizens on a purely voluntary basis so that we can be free from the coercive nature of abusive taxation and regulations. Now, a lot of people don't really know how government could run without taxation. Tell us how that could work.
Sure. So, first, well, I kind of want to say, the reason that's there is because you have a lot of people in the Libertarian Party who are like, just get rid of the whole thing. And anarchists, they don't want to vote at all, but, and they want to get rid of government completely. And there's a point to recognize here that if government weren't trampling our rights and it weren't robbing us and all these other things, would it really be so bad if it actually existed? If it were limited to building libraries with a voluntary source of funds, would it be so bad? And I think the answer is no.
Okay.
And it would, maybe you wouldn't call it government. Maybe you would just call it a nonprofit library organization, and that's fine. But tomato, right?
Right.
Whatever you want to call it. But so yeah, the idea is that it needs to be voluntary, right? And a lot of people ask, okay, so how do you fund a government voluntarily? Well, the first thing you do is you get rid of all of the waste, which is like probably 90 to 99% of the budget.
Right.
You get rid of all the waste, and then you're left with a much smaller amount that you have to come up with. And so coming up with this smaller amount, well, there are all kinds of ways that the government has raised money in the past. You've got bonds that they issue for public projects, which are basically, let's say the country needs a railroad, right? So the government sells bonds to build the railroad. They build the railroad. They lease the railroad out to businesses who are going to use it, or to customers who are going to use it to travel. And this is probably like 1800s how this could work, right?
Right.
Because now it's like the Uber of cars kind of thing. But so this is a government project, and so the money that's charged from those railroads goes ultimately back to the government to pay off those bonds. Now, could any other private organization do that? Absolutely.
Right.
Do other private organizations do that? Absolutely. So it comes down, but that's like the competition of it, right? That's, if Elon Musk wants to create his high-speed vacuum tunnel, whatever it's called, tube, let him raise the money for that through private investors and whatever else, and he's going to charge money for it. And if government wants to do the same thing, well, let them. But the important distinction is when you look at a private person like Elon trying to do this, he's looking at numbers. How much money are we going to make from this? Are we going to make enough money back to quote unquote pay off the bonds, right? To pay off the investors. When the government does it, they basically say, well, how much money can we steal from people, and is it enough to pay for this project 3 times over, so that we can make sure our friends in the special interest groups that are benefiting from like the steel companies and manufacturing companies and everything else can butter their biscuit, right? So it's they're completely separate beasts, but we have to realize that it is absolutely possible for government to do things, but we also need to make sure that we're not going to give them a monopoly power, because then that prevents private competition, which 9 times out of 10 does things much more efficiently.
Well, exactly. And that's the thing. You even talk about on your website, you talked about, I like how you said, I'm going to give you free healthcare and free education. You have a little V there to denote you're saying the verb of free. I'm going to free healthcare and free education. But on those pages you talk about, on your site, you talk about how a not free market is harming us. And you talked about a couple things you brought up where, a hepatitis B pill that costs $4 in India is like $4,000 here now, probably made here, I would assume, or made, if not here, then in Canada or Europe or something like that. But then it's sold there at market price, banned from importation back here, so that we can't get it for $4 and ship it back here, a little tiny pill. And then, like a bag of saline, which is literally just salt water, is like up to $1,000 when it's billed to your insurance company. And it's, maybe for the bag and the water combined, it's worth $1. Let's even say it's worth $5. But, they're charging, literally 200 times as much. That's the wages of as you said, an organization that's primarily concerned about getting reelected and getting their special interest paid off, as opposed to making a profit and competing with others. Now, I guess my question to you is, maybe this is a semantics thing. If we're talking about a government that is funded entirely voluntarily and allows private competitors to compete with it on equal terms, where they're not, using regulations or licensing or whatever to harm their competitors, is that substantively different than a stateless society, or is it government in name only, or do you see a distinction there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to say, because everyone's got their definition of what government is. Right. I mean, let's say you had government and it was still just as bad as it is now, but the police were a different organization. The regulations were completely different. And so you had like 10 governments. Would you call them collectively a government or not? Or would you call them 10 different governments? Would you call them nonprofit organizations? Would you call them criminal organizations?
Right.
It's really just a name. So I think, going back to the idea that if you have all these organizations that are doing things, and you will have, I mean, look, even with all of the regulations in place, you've got charities, you've got people who are willing to do good for free. And you also have scams. You have scam charities that are willing to do something for free, and the government hasn't prevented them from existing. But it's up to us to spread the word to our friends and say, don't donate to this place because they're a scam, donate to the other place. It's up to us to kind of review and do that sort of thing. And, we have ways of doing that, like, through online reviews and ratings and word of mouth and that. And especially now we have the technology to spread that information so much faster. But yeah, I think it's really just like how you think about it. And what I think is really interesting is if you at least have competition, if there were 2 governments, and let's say they all provided the same services. So you had 2 organizations in every city that were providing police and fire and everything else, and 2 organizations nationally that had some sort of, I don't know, defense army or court system, and none of them charged taxes. And then one of them came along and said, hey, we're going to charge taxes to everybody. You have to pay it. Whether you agree with it or not, you have to pay us.
Right.
What would people do? They'd probably go to the other government and say, hey, that guy's trying to rob us. What are you going to do about it?
Exactly.
I think it's like really a matter of perspective about, people really have to understand what the purpose of government is, and to see how it's overstepped so much, and that now everything that it does, good intentions or not, it's causing much more harm than if it would just piss off and go away.
Right. And it's like you said, it's less about the definition of whether it's government or not, and it's more about, is there coercion, is there theft, or are you being, are you allowed to voluntarily interact or not interact with whomever you wish, and allow and have multiple people being able to compete? Is it a market set free, or is it another name for government? Now it's just mafias or something like that doing it. So that's a good point. We have some comments here. Let's see. Karen Thompson says, that's an amazing point. Why are so many career politicians super wealthy just from their political connections? I don't know any actual volunteers who have 3 or 4 houses funded from their efforts. Exactly. Rod Weber says, start talking about explosions or I'm out. Explode those pills. Explode them. I want mandatory explosions. Thoughts on that, Dan?
Yeah, we actually have a really awesome commercial coming up for the campaign in the next week or 2 that's got lots of explosions in it.
Oh, well, good. Well, Rod, be sure to check that out. Karen says, Rod Weber, we need to GoFundMe your bail expenses. I think he might explode the GoFundMe. So I don't know how much that'll help. But yeah, anyone who wants to see explosions, the campaign, I'm actually looking forward to that now, because I'm looking forward to seeing what you're talking about there.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. So I wanted to ask this. We talked about this briefly, I think when we were going back from the debate back to the after party or whatever. Some of the stuff you talked about, specifically about taxation and the IRS. Would you mind delving into that a bit? Because I had heard that before, but I had only heard about it from sovereign citizens who then talked about how my social security number was like a debt, and then they were gonna, for the low price of whatever, they were gonna sell me a kit on how to be able to claim people's homes and stuff like that, and they sort of lost me.
Right.
So without all of that, explain the part about what you were saying with taxation and whether the average American is even legally subject to the IRS in the first place.
So I'll try to break this down as simple as I can. It's really difficult because as much as I've been trying to understand it for the past like 10 or 15 years, it's taken me that long to really understand it.
Okay.
Let me start with this. There's a couple really great books out there. One is called Shattering the Myths by Dave Champion, and another one is called what is it? Cracking the Code by I can't remember the name. Look for Cracking the Code. That one's actually out of print, but you can find them on Amazon for they're not super cheap, but they're both really great books. They're I would say most combined 90% accuracy. Some people have pointed out some little issues here and there. But here's the main idea. Before the 1900s, there was an income tax that was instituted. Twice, the Supreme Court ruled that an income tax was unconstitutional.
Okay.
So then a lot of people will say, yeah, but then they came up with the 16th Amendment, which says they can tax income. Well, it says a lot of things in there. It says they can tax income without apportionment. And that was one of the reasons that the income tax before was ruled unconstitutional, was because it was a direct tax and it was not apportioned. And it says direct taxes have to be apportioned. Now, for some reason, when I read the Constitution and it says the government is allowed to tax the states, to me that says that they're going to tax the states, and it says that has to be apportioned based on their population. That means a state that has a bigger population is going to pay a bigger tax. But that doesn't say that they can tax the people directly, because then it's not apportioned, then it's the same amount per person, right?
Right. It's like a head tax.
Yeah. So, anyways, so the 16th Amendment, if you read it, and what the courts have said in people trying to say it's unconstitutional, is that the 16th Amendment gave Congress no new taxing power. And the reason is because the income tax as it exists is an excise tax. And excise taxes don't need to be apportioned. They just need to be taxed on privileged exercise of a privilege, right? Now, here's the thing. Supreme Courts have always said your property is your property. Your money is your property. You have an inalienable right to contract your property for other people's property, your labor for other people's property. Your property is labor. Your labor is property.
Right.
All of these things the Supreme Court agrees with. So how is it that if I work for you and you give me money that they can tax it? And because that's not a privilege, right? That's not a privileged thing that we're exercising. And the Supreme Court also says that a right cannot be converted into a privilege just to be taxed, which means this is a right that we have. You can't change that and say it's a privilege now. And so what they did is they said, okay, well, we're going to tax privileged exchanges of money. And to understand what that means, well, if you're doing business with the government, that's privileged, right? Because like I can do business with you and it's your right and my right to decide whether or not we want to do this. But if you want to do business with the government, that's the government's right to decide. And the government can say, well, we don't want to do business with you, or we'll do business with you only if you pay a tax. Right. So that, it's kind of like if I do business with you, you can say, well, you can only do business with me if you pay a tax to my employer or something, which is really kind of how things work, right? Your profit goes there and everything else.
Right.
So basically that's how the income tax is built, and that's how it reads. And you start reading through these codes and you understand when they say employee, and this is where it gets really screwed up because you don't have the definitions to go by when you're filling out your 1040 form, right? It says, are you a U.S. citizen? Well, apparently most people aren't, because a citizen is a privileged position. This is where it gets really interesting because there's a difference between citizen and a national. And they have very similar definitions, but in the context of filing your tax form, you are not a citizen, you are a national. And that doesn't mean you can't have a U.S. passport. Actually, as a matter of fact, I don't have my passport right here. In your passport, it doesn't say you're a citizen of the United States. It says you're a national of the United States.
Okay.
Which is like, that's interesting, right?
Right.
So we have this idea about citizenship, and it's like, why? Where did we learn that from, really? Public school? And so all of these definitions are like so like defined by other words, which are defined by other words. And so you have an employee. An employee is somebody who works for an employer. Well, duh, obviously. An employer is defined as the government, state government, local government, national government, federal government, whatever. Those sorts of things. So if you're like, you hear employee and you're like, oh yeah, it's me, I'm an employee. Well, why do you think you're an employee?
Right.
But if you understand the definitions, it's like, oh, that's not right. And so we're tricked into the system because any job you go for, they make you fill out a W-4 form, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried this before. I said, hey, I'm not a U.S. person, which it asks if you're a U.S. person. Why doesn't it say, are you a U.S. citizen? Why does it say U.S. person? Why is that? What's the difference here, right? And it asks all these really confusing questions with confusing language where if you don't think about it, you're just like, yeah, okay, I guess that's
I'm a
me.
person.
But if you think about it, it's like, what? Why are they using these funny words? And if you try to not fill that out, well, your employer's more scared of the IRS than they are of you, who technically doesn't work for them yet.
Right.
So they're going to go by the IRS lead. Now, how do we get to this system? Apparently, when the income tax was passed in 1913, they basically said, okay, yeah, we're going to tax. And you can go back and look how many people were paying the income tax in 1913, 1914, 1920. Not a whole lot.
Right.
World War II came along and the government was like, oh, we need guns and butter, right?
Right.
We need everything, right? So the government started investing in the production of tanks and bombs and guns and cars and everything else, right? We need to boom our economy. We need all this stuff. And so that was federal money. So now all the companies that were receiving that federal money now had to give those forms to their employees. And everybody was up with this because they were like, oh yeah, we're going to war. We're attacked. We're being attacked by other countries.
We have to kill the Nazis. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So we got into this habit of filling out this form, and then a few years later, when the war is over, we're still in that habit, and the government's like, yeah, just keep filling it out. And so we did. And 60 years later, pretty much everybody who's paying taxes now has been born into that system. And we're just like, well, that's the way it always has been. What do you mean this is a lie? What do you mean this is a scam? It doesn't make any sense. My parents have always paid taxes. And so like we've been bamboozled into the system. And so, a lot of people are like, oh, so I don't want to pay. And that's the first place everybody jumps to. And I don't want to tell everybody, to do that, because it is a really complicated system. And if you do something a little bit wrong, the IRS is prepared to just rain terror down on
destroy your life. Right. Yeah. And just to be clear, just let me stop you. Just to be clear, on both my show and Dan's show, because this is both of our show at the same time. We here at Muddy Waters Media and at Dan Taxation is Theft Enterprises, or whatever it's called, are not advocating for you, or at least I'm not advocating for you to ever break the law, because breaking the law is illegal, and illegal things are against the law, and we don't advocate for that. But so
right,
yeah. So there are people who are successfully fighting this and saying I don't pay taxes, and they're winning in court.
Yep. Well, that's the trick, right? So a lot of people say, well, I haven't found a single court case where somebody's won, and it's very rare. But I'll tell you this: Joe Bannister, who's an ex-employee of the IRS, he was a special investigator. He was very high up there. He heard about this in the 90s, I believe, and he approached his employer, and his employer said, "Keep your mouth shut or quit." So he quit, and he went on to spread this information. He's been sued, I don't know, a dozen times by the IRS, and he's beaten most of them. So yes, there are people successfully doing this. The thing with the court cases is, let me do this. I'll use the traffic courts, right?
Okay.
You will not find a single case of a person going into a traffic court and winning because they said they don't want to pay the ticket and they're just not going to pay it.
Right.
You'll never find that. It's not in a court. But I can tell you personally, I haven't had a driver's license in 12 or so years, and I've received traffic tickets and parking tickets, and I've not paid a single one of them. But there's no court record of any of it. Why? Because it never made it to court. And so the thing with the IRS is, if you never make to court, there's no court record saying you won. And they don't take court cases to court that, because here's the thing. Let's say you don't believe me, right? But just go with me here.
Right.
Let's say there is some big conspiracy, right? Hypothetically, this is just a big conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
If the IRS wanted to make sure that people didn't find out about this lie, wouldn't they just say, oh, that guy knows about the lie, let's not take him to court because he could expose it on record in court? Let's skip that guy and let's go to the guy who's just pissed off and just doesn't want to pay.
Let's make examples out of the people that aren't doing it right and are just going, I'm not paying that, and then they get screwed up in court, as opposed to people that successfully would be able to successfully argue in court that they're not a U.S. citizen or U.S. person or whatever, and that there's no need for them to have to pay any of this.
Right. And that's actually one of the flaws right there. Just saying you're not a U.S. person, or that doesn't even work. They consider that a frivolous argument. And one of the reasons is because they have the paperwork that you already signed that basically says you are. So it is really tricky. And it's not like you can, they have all these frivolous arguments that don't work. Saying my income is not taxable or all these things. And so it is a tricky system. But what I do want to say is, knowing people that have done this and on the path to, and here's another thing, I do want to tell people my success story with it, but I'm not at the end of it yet.
Okay.
So hopefully sometime next year I'll have a great story for you. But the idea is, when NASA first shot people into space, right? How many people died on exploding rockets because they thought they had all these engineers, these brilliant people who were going to shoot a rocket up into space, and they were going to get these people up there. And people died.
Right.
What happened? And now there's a space station with people on it, unless you believe in, the conspiracy that none of that exists. There's people in space. But it's like the laws of physics didn't change. They didn't repeal the rocket explodey act of 1973, right? So, but what changed? They got smarter on their approach. They learned to understand the laws of physics better and the machines that they were creating. And so in the same way, the tax protester movement has come across that same journey. Like there are many people who have gone to jail trying to fight this and figuring out all the right ways to fight it.
Right.
And some of them, Erwin Schiff was a big one, and a lot of information that he had was wrong. But at the time, he was the pioneer. He was on the front line learning everything, because you have to go back 1913. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have computers where you could like search through 100,000 pages of tax code and find out, well, what does the definition of this mean?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's technology has helped us along this journey, and we're smarter now.
Right. Now, let's be clear. The Rocket Explodey Act of 1973 was terrible legislation, and I think we can all thank God that that's gone.
Yeah.
But so now you threw out a lot of names there and a lot of different books and things. Let's just go over those again. If people wanted to hear more about this, about not just that taxation is theft, but that it's actually illegal and that they could potentially fight it if they choose. We're not advocating one way or the other. We're just saying they could choose. What would be some names and books and so forth that they should Google to find out more about that?
Okay, so there's 2 books. Well, let me give you 3 books.
Okay.
I'll start with the most recent and probably the most accurate. And that would be Shattering the Myths by Dave Champion.
Okay.
The second will be Cracking the Code
Mm-hmm.
by Peter Hendrickson.
Okay.
And the third, and this one's definitely outdated, but it's really a classical, like if you can get your hands on it, get it, because it's probably going to be worth $1 million one day.
Okay.
Erwin Schiff's The Federal Mafia.
Very good. So those would be the 3 that you would start on.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we have a couple questioner comment, a couple follower comments. One asked a question that I was already going to ask you, so I'll ask that later. But Bass over on YouTube asked, can a libertarian government protect its people and sovereignty from foreign influence? Would the military have to set up a GoFundMe? I'm not sure if he means foreign influence isn't like an invasion, but let's assume that. So, how would, for example, I guess national defense, for lack of a better word, be set up in a voluntary payment system?
Right. So this is something that we have to rethink. And like,
yes.
I'm trying to think of an example. Going back and forth between the U.S. and Mexico, I see things done completely different. I see things done in ways that I never would have imagined in the United States. And that's just because we're in the United States. We see things done a certain way. That's the only way we know. But when we take our heads out of that bubble that we're in,
right,
we can see things being done in a completely different ways. So now the question is, how do we get a military? Do we do GoFundMe? Well, that still depends on the belief that we're still going to have some central government, some central authority, that all of the soldiers are going to work directly underneath. You're going to have your generals, your 4-star generals, 3-star generals, all the way down to, your officers, that all of the soldiers are going to work directly underneath. You're going to have your
Sorry.
Oh,
go ahead.
I thought I heard myself talking to myself.
You did.
And I was like,
you did. And
the shrooms kicked in.
Yeah. The ketamine has kicked in. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So that's under that same belief.
Right.
And it really doesn't have to be that way. And then the question is, okay, well, how do you get the money to the top so it can trickle down to all of the employees? That's not really how it would work. And if you look at how did it work before? And read the Constitution. It talks about a volunteer militia. It says well-regulated, which a lot of people think means the government needs to control every aspect of it. But that's not even what regulated means or meant back then.
Right.
But you have this idea of a volunteer militia. And what's really important about that and understanding what that is. And I mean, look at Switzerland, right? That's kind of an example where it has worked. And there are many other countries where that has worked. The idea of this is, if you are, as an individual, part of a militia that is completely volunteer, you're not there following orders. So if somebody wants to invade the United States, you get together and say, hey, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. That's why Japan never invaded during, they never attacked mainland United States, because they said there would be a gun behind every blade of
grass. Right.
And so that's a legitimate fear for anybody trying to invade. But of course, if we take our guns away, then we don't have that. That is a legitimate defense system, and it doesn't require doing a GoFundMe or anything. It just requires that everybody be armed to protect themselves, whether it's from their neighbor or from an invasion. And when that happens, and what's really great about this is this prevents the situations where you have like what we have now, where you've got this military that's just like, well, who are we going to bomb today? We got all these planes and everything sitting around. We can't just let them sit there and rest. We got to go drop some bombs.
Yep.
That doesn't happen with a volunteer militia.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of benefits. Now, how would every single little aspect of everything work out? I don't know. I can't tell you. But that's the concept of freedom, which is, we're not trying to predict the future and say this is the way it must be, let's make it happen, because that always fails. What it does is it says, look, we understand that there are credible threats around the world. Let's figure out how to deal with them, and the best ideas will rise to the top, and the people who are willing to defend this country will stand up and defend this country.
Right. And I mean, so to me, and I agree with what you just said, to me, the question of, without, taxation or without government, who would defend us from foreign invasion is in some ways it's sort of like asking who's going to protect Amazon from Macy's. Like if a or who's going to protect, Uber from, a guy on a rickshaw or something like that. Like if the people in what used to be the most powerful government on earth, the people that live where that used to be have demonstrated that, they're not going to tolerate even domestic governance, what foreign body would want to try to invade them and stop that? And an even bigger question is, if we've demonstrated that in what used to be the largest and most powerful government on earth, that we don't need it, and that freedom and whether it's anarchy or a voluntary based government or whatever, that freedom and liberty actually works, what is going to protect all of those old statist governments from their own citizens demanding the same thing and hiring, liberation firms from the former U.S. to, liberate them from their statist oppressors? So I think when you're talking about that big of a paradigm shift, the questions completely change. And I think you started off by saying we need to be thinking about this completely differently, because the idea of, well, who's going to stop China from invading us would be more like, who's going to stop the Chinese government from being trampled by the 1.4 billion people that they're enslaving, when they can see that they don't actually need government, or don't need an oppressive taxing government to have a society. Dan, who's more Jewish between you or me? Who would you say?
It's probably going to be you. I'm really bad at it.
Are you a bad Jew?
Yeah.
That's not like a kippah to you?
No, I mean, I'm definitely not eating kosher.
No, but you do have a giant, what we could call a kippah on your head.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? Okay. That's, sorry, you threw me off there because I pronounce it kippah.
Oh, sorry.
Or kippah. But
because you might be more Jewish than me.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, so yeah, I was thinking this the other day, because, there's this issue with the hat that a lot of libertarians don't like it. And I'm like, hey, this really could be considered religious headwear. And what's interesting is I used to work for the Kabbalah Center.
Oh, wow.
As a video editor. And so I got to sit through a lot of their classes and edit them. And it was actually really interesting because they gave me the story of the kippah, which is, and now they're not necessarily Jewish, and their interpretation is slightly different in some aspects, I think. So, but this is their interpretation,
right?
That, we are beings of energy, and we receive light from the sun, right?
Okay.
or from the creator, however you want to interpret that. And that comes down, and that was supposed to be basically a receptor of this light so that we could become, lit beings. And that this idea is like, now we're going to share the light with other people. We're going to be good people. We're going to be good to others. We're going to solve the world's problems. I probably added that last part. But in that way, like, solve the world's problems, but like in our communities, we're going to help people out and be good people. And I just have this huge satellite dish basically receiving lots of extra light because I'm trying to change a much bigger world and solve much bigger problems. That could be argued.
It should be argued. So if I had the time to think of that, or if you had mentioned it beforehand, when, for example, the South Carolina Libertarian Party, which would not do that now, by the way, under the new leadership, they would not have given you a hard time about the hat. But under the previous regime, when they told you that there was no novelty headwear, I think they called it, I would have loved for either you or Vermin Supreme, or both of you, to argue that this was religious headwear, and you as a Jew, I mean, you could have said, this is a yarmulke. Prove me wrong. Prove that this is not a yarmulke, and now, face the backlash and the front lash of the Jewish community being told that they can't wear religious headwear. I would have actually loved that.
I mean, I've got a friend who's got his photo with a colander on his head on his driver's license.
Oh, is he a Pastafarian?
Yeah.
Nice.
And it's actually, and it has actually, as a matter of fact, he has a little piece of tape, like masking tape with taxation is theft written on it. So, yeah.
That's actually really cool. So speaking of the debate in the convention, you were, of course, at the South Carolina Libertarian Party debate. How angry were you that the microscopic drone that the government has following Adam Kokesh kept messing up the microphones?
I mean, technically it was a good thing for me, but
gave you time to...
Yeah. No, really, like, I like Adam. I like a lot of the other candidates. As much as you see these other debates between Republicans or Democrats, and they're all like, trying to call each other liars and frauds and everything. Right. Well, we're not liars and frauds, which might be one of the reasons we're not calling each other out on it. But we're actually, I think, we're willing to work together to achieve the goal that we need to get more people into the Libertarian Party. And I think that's what's really great about what we're doing. As much crap as everybody talks about us, for my hat, Vermin's hat, everybody's like history of saying abrasive things on the internet and whatever they have to throw at us.
Right.
We make a great team. And what I'd like to see is, once I get the nomination, is I would like to have a lot of those people on my team to help me keep pushing the campaign forward, because I've always hated this. You go into like the Texas gubernatorial race in 2018 or 2016. We had some really great candidates. I think it was 2018. And I'm like, I can't pick just one. Why can't they run as a team? Why can't they work together? And I think that could happen with some of the candidates that we have today in the Libertarian POTUS race.
Well, and even, with very minor, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Exceptions. Most of the candidates are very nice to each other and very complimentary to each other. Even when there's disagreement, it's on the actual policy, as opposed to like, you're a bad person, or you're a liar, or you hate America, or whatever. Like, it's very, even in the cases of, like, for example, you versus, say, a Ken Armstrong, even though there's vast differences in policy there, you both seem to at least want to move in the same direction, maybe not as far, but you want to go in the same direction, at least for now, and you're also complimentary towards each other and understanding that you're on the same team. So that's been really cool and kind of refreshing from, for example, the Republican or Democrat debates, where there's almost no difference between them, and they argue with each other like, it's me or all these other terrible scumbags who are the worst possible choice for America, but also if they win, I'm going to immediately endorse them.
Right. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So this is as good a time as any for me to do my my little shill that I have to do. Hey gang, are you thinking of starting a podcast? Well, I hope to hell you are, because Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives you the tools you need in one place for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer. Why? They even have creation tools, you see, that allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds great. They'll distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can easily make money from your podcast, get this guys, with no minimum listenership. Now, I know what you're thinking, friends. No minimum listenership? Great day in the morning. Well, you'll have a great day in the morning too. If you download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started, be sure to check us out on anchor.fm/Muddied Waters Media, I think. Actually, I think it's anchor.fm/Muddied Waters. Just go to anchor.fm and look for Muddied Waters. We're there. But be sure to do that. Now, Dan, up until now, I've been nice. But now it gets ugly.
Hit me with the hard ones.
Oh, yeah, no, it's going to get ugly now. I'm actually going to shift into an ugly stance. Dan, I'm going to be frank with you. One of your campaign promises is to legalize pineapple pizza. Legalization, of course, means taxation and regulation. Did you really mean decriminalize pineapple pizza? Or do you really want my 85-year-old grandmother to be arrested and put in a cage for letting her pineapple pizza license expire?
Well, that is a tough call. We really can't have anybody with expired pineapple pizza licenses. No, absolutely. This is anything should be decriminalized. It should be removed from the DEA's list of Schedule 1 narcotics. It's really, what's interesting about that platform is I started it kind of as a joke, and then I found out that the Prime Minister of Iceland wanted to ban it.
Oh, so you did that before that?
Yeah.
Oh.
Just because I love pineapple pizza. I'm a bit of a connoisseur. And yeah, so that was my thing, and I saw people fighting over it. But I also thought it was a great analogy for the drug war.
Right.
Nobody has the right to tell you what you can or can't put in your own body. And I may not agree with what you put on your pizza, but I will defend to the death your right to eat it.
So that was actually, I assumed that you did that as sort of a counterpoint or leveraging off of that whole argument that was started by, and I think it was the Prime Minister of Iceland, some politician in Iceland,
right,
who said that, jokingly, that pineapple pizza, maybe it wasn't jokingly. They tend to ban stuff over there.
He said it was jokingly in his apology, so I don't know.
Well, maybe there was just too much backlash on it, but jokingly or not, he said that pineapple pizza should be banned. I assume that you started that on that, but you actually did that before all of that.
Right.
Sort of using
it was also before the Department of Homeland Security put out the press release saying the Russians are going to invade our social media and get us to fight over whether or not pineapple belongs on pizza.
They really said that?
They really said that. If you go to legalizepineapplepizza.org, I didn't give you that one for your show notes.
Oh, we'll put that in the show notes.
That's your fault. Legalizepineapplepizza.org, and scroll down. You can actually get a link to the actual document that Department of Homeland Security put out, saying that the beware of Russian pineapple pizza.
I'm putting this in the show notes. Legalizepineapplepizza.org, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they literally wasted taxpayer money to tell people that the Russians were going to have them arguing. I wonder, do you think the Russians started the whole Popeyes versus Chick-fil-A thing? Because that feels very Russian.
I guess I was rushing to get mine.
Hold on. I got one. Here, say it again.
I was rushing to get mine. There you go.
Huh? So that's good. So I wanted to ask you about, I noticed, so you are involved with the Students for Liberty of Uganda. And it's interesting because I had just spoken with, I don't know if you know, Mike Avi, who works in the college recruitment for Students for Liberty. And he was talking about their presence in Uganda specifically, and in other places in Africa. Some of us may know about their anti-LGBT, anti-gay laws, but I think very few of us really understand the state of how bad things are there from many perspectives, but especially from the freedom of expression and liberty perspective. Tell us about that, and also tell us about how you're helping them over there with SFL Uganda.
So that was interesting because while I was there, somebody asked the question. I'm trying to remember what word they used. They were talking about gay people, and what did they call stubborn? They called them stubborn, right? Because that's like the euphemism for that, right? So what do we do with all these stubborn people if we don't have government? And that was really interesting to see. But in the room that I was in, there really weren't a whole lot of people who were concerned about that. There were a lot of people who were very concerned with freedom, very anti-tax. Some people were, kind of on the fence, but I don't think there were really any of those abrasive type people. Now, there was a video that I saw. I don't remember, it was somewhere around Africa, which I know is a huge continent, but it was, and I think it was like on a Tosh 2.0 show where they were talking about how bad gay people are,
right,
and what they like to do. And I'm not going to get into it, but it was pretty gross, but it was propaganda,
right?
And I'm like watching that. You can look it up. I don't know if it's
I know what you're talking about, where he's like graphically describing with like kids present, like all these terrible things that like pretty much no one does. Like, yeah, maybe 1% of that. Probably
no. It was like they eat the poo poo.
Yeah. They eat the poo poo. Like no one's doing that. Was, yeah.
And there is that, but it's like fear mongering and propaganda, and I'm sure, I'm sure he didn't actually see somebody do that. He probably heard it from somebody else, like kids on a playground, right? And they start spreading rumors and how terrible people are, and I mean, if that's what they're doing anyway, I mean, the worst you should do is stand a few feet back so you don't smell their breath. But who really cares? And I think like in that group there, they're doing really great work, and there's so many organizations, it's really hard to identify who's where, but I mean, they're spreading all across the African continent. Just at the event that I went to, there were people from Nigeria and Congo and all kinds of other countries around there. I kind of want to say Somalia, but I don't think I met anybody from Somalia. I was looking for somebody from Somalia so I could I want to go and visit.
Well,
so I can say at least I've been there.
All the real libertarians already live in Somalia, so that's probably why they don't need it, because it's already perfect liberty there, I'm told.
Right. And I actually read this book, In Defense of Chaos, which had some really interesting points about Somalia, and basically said once the government was gone, that the country's still kind of not the greatest place to live, but since the government left, like everything has gotten so much better. They have like they have like a dozen airlines that are running flights out of that country, like to other countries that like couldn't exist before because of government regulation. There's competition, there's infrastructure, there's high-speed cell phones, like all this crazy stuff's popping up. And I went on Google Maps just to because they've got like every hotel in the world on there.
Yep.
And I started looking at hotels around there. There's some pretty nice places. So, and roads.
Somehow, miracle of miracles, they were able to work that out. So you might, legalize poo-poo pizza could actually be your next thing. That could be like a pro LGBT. Probably not. So we got some more comments. Jacob LaBelle, one of our top super fan, Jacob LaBelle, is not happy. Pineapple pizza is a crime against humanity. I was going to vote for him. Kim Ruff, it is then. So he does love Ugandans, though. So that's good. Tom Arnold is glad to see that I've gotten out of bed. Thank you. He also says Idi Amin was fabulous, which, sure. I mean, I guess he's kind of like the African dictator version of Liberace.
Right.
Yeah,
it's I mean, look, here's they've got their history out there, and it's really interesting to see that, you go to a country where a lot of people are starving and really don't have much to live on.
Right.
And, we were at this university, and you could literally look out into the hills, and there is just like miles and miles and miles of land with lots of green grass, which means it's getting plenty of rainfall. Why aren't people out there homesteading, collecting rainwater, and doing all this other stuff? Well, because that's government protected land, I can assure you.
Right.
It's government is the reason people are poor, people are starved, people are homeless. It's always government. There's so many ways that we can survive on natural resources, but they have taken that away from us and said, oh no, it's only for the people that are going to give me riches and make me live like a king as your ruler.
Right.
So
no, exactly. Now of course we did a red carpet interview together. Was I as impressive in person as I am right now?
I don't know how to answer that question, because if I say
you lose either way. No, you lose.
Okay, equally, yes, equally impressive. Let's
no,
go there.
That also makes you lose. You lose either way. But so just be honest, because you're going to lose. You've already lost. What right now? You're like, this is better, or like when I was. So when, guys,
that's why I didn't want to answer.
So
because
no,
I'd either have to say you were worse in person or worse on the internet, and
so I lose either way.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's even better.
But if I say equal, it's all good, right?
I guess so. So guys, when I say red carpet interview, we were on it was actually a 34 by 26 square of kitchen mat, but it was red, and we were really close. Yeah, it was about that big. Yeah, and we were touching toes. It was intense. It was really nice. I really enjoyed that. Now, your hat, I've had. So I always ask my followers, before I have someone on, to ask, me questions for my guest, and I'll answer. Half of them were various variations of what's up with your hat. Tell us a story about your hat. Why do you wear the hat? Why does it say taxation is theft, as opposed to, I guess, something else? We've talked about it being a potential religious thing, but how did the hat come about? And tell us the story about the hat.
I could write a book on that.
Okay.
Maybe I should.
You should.
Me, libertarianism, and my hat.
I hat.
There we go. So let's see the story behind it.
Okay.
I had gone through my evolutionary history of Democrat, Republican, Ron Paul, Tea Party, everything else, not happy. Came to the Libertarians. Gary Johnson, our savior. Yes. 2012, I supported him and voted for him. 2016 came along. I was working on the John McAfee campaign, but I still decided no matter who wins, I will support them out of these candidates because I like all those candidates. I don't think there was anybody I didn't like in 2016. If there was, I forgot about him. Gary Johnson, I met him several times along the campaign trail. He came to Texas. I saw him in Orlando, and I'd met him a couple times before, and I was like, okay, this guy's cool. I like him, right? But I had this impression that he wasn't really all taxation is theft, which was one of the reasons I came to the Libertarian Party, because I had my fights with the IRS before.
Right.
And I knew that was theft. And I saw the damage they'd done. They made people homeless. They destroyed lives. They destroyed businesses.
Oh, yeah.
I hated the IRS. Mm-hmm. Taxation was theft.
Yep.
He didn't believe that. He wanted the fair tax. Now, I was like, okay, maybe I can't figure out a better solution than that at this point. This is back in 2016. If that's all he's got, okay, I'm not okay with it, but I'll still support him because he's better than Democrats and Republicans. And so he got the nomination. He went up on stage. He made his victory speech. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And taxation is theft. And I was like, at that moment, just crushed because one, McAfee lost, and that was a campaign I was working on.
Right.
But also now he's pandering.
Yeah.
Because he did not believe that taxation is theft. Like, if he would have said taxation is theft sometimes, that would have been okay.
Right.
Like, that wouldn't have just came out as like, oh, he's a panderer, he's a liar, whatever. So I was like, I can't support this guy. And I was just in this zone. I was mad, I was depressed, I was angry. I don't know. I was going around the entire convention. is taxation theft? Is taxation theft? Everybody, I was asking. And half the people, it was really about 50-50 split. Half the people said, yes, taxation is theft. Hell yeah, high five. Right. And then the other half, I shit you not, I don't know what club they go to where they learn to talk the same. Is taxation theft? Well, it always started out like that. I don't know why. That was so weird. It's the weirdest thing.
Right.
And then they gave some excuse. Well, most of the times it is, but not always. And, you know, things like this. And I was like, half of the Libertarian Party, did I say Libertarian Party?
Well, maybe they're the Libertarians. Maybe they went to the wrong convention. They were waiting for the liver to come out. And then instead there's some tall guy coming up to him. Is taxation theft? I don't know. Where's the liver? Sorry.
Right. Yeah, nobody likes liver. So that would make sense. Yeah, so I was like, something needs to be done about this.
Right.
And so the next convention came around, 2018 in New Orleans. And I at this point, I already had my Taxation is Theft store up online selling merch and started doing the podcast or some other kind of like promotional videos. And I got a table. I rented a table from the convention and everything taxation is theft. I had yard signs, T-shirts. I had a wall of like handwritten notes that people could come up and write people's names. And it was like, the caption was like, these people's lives have been destroyed by the government.
Right.
And it was like a wall of just like, you know, all these people, some famous, some not, some had family members who, you know, just had everything taken from them, assaulted by the police, sitting in prison for unjust reasons.
Yeah.
Anyways, all kinds of taxation is theft, everything. We had an 8 by 10 foot backdrop. We had a yellow carpet. It was like a 10-foot long roll of yellow carpet for photos. And I was like, I need to really top this off with something. What can I do? So I found the biggest, yellowest, brightest hat I could find.
Okay.
And I stuck a big yellow taxation is theft sticker on it. Actually,
Nice.
2 of them at the convention. But it's just so hard to keep this thing maintained.
No, I can tell. That was one of the first things I thought was, I'm like, okay, so this isn't just a hat. Like it's massive. And guys, and this was I wish I had the video.
It looks bigger in person, right?
It is way bigger because you're tall. So I assume, I'm looking at your pictures and you have it where, like how you have it right now, where you can actually see it, where you can see the entire hat. And so that makes you look short. Right. And that makes you look shorter. So then I meet you and you're like what? Like 6'1", 6'2", something like that?
Yep.
Yeah. And so, and then the hat. And so, you know, there's like 7 feet. So, I mean, it is a gigantic, he's a large man. This hat is huge. So like there's special care. Is that a carry-on? Like how do you transport with that?
It's, you know, I break the airline rules all the time. When I do travel with a carry-on and my personal item, which is my backpack, this is my second personal item.
Oh,
I don't get away
okay.
with it.
You just carry it?
But yeah, I carry it. Sometimes I fit it in a bag. I have a bag that it fits, and like I just fold these up on the side, and then like I put like, you know, stuff inside, outside, whatever to protect it. But
right.
And sometimes I just wear it. Actually, I have a video of me wearing it, going through the boarding process, because that disturbed me, and I was like, oh, I got my body cam. I'm at this place again.
Yeah.
I got to record this. There's this process they have at the airports where you don't show them your ticket anymore. You look into a camera and it recognizes you. And I have no idea what database they're using.
That's scary.
Yeah, because I'll just say Delta, because I don't know if that's their thing or you know, if other lines. I haven't seen another airline use it, but I don't know where Delta got my picture to match it.
Right. Where did they even get a good enough picture of you for biometric purposes? Because that's not a regular picture.
Yeah, and when I was wearing the hat when I took the picture, so on top of that, it's creepy.
So unless you're wearing that hat, NSA is not gonna be able to find you.
Yeah, if I take it off, they're like, we don't know who this guy
like,
is.
who the hell is this? He doesn't have a massive yellow mass on the top of his head. That is funny. So when we did the interview, I asked about your hat, and you told me that it was made in a place out of material. A lot of my followers saw the interview, and they messaged me asking if you could maybe give a little more detail about if someone wanted to get that hat, if it's available, and if so, where and how.
Made in America.
Okay. That's really just all we're saying.
And I believe it's camel hair.
Really?
I believe so.
Okay.
I don't know if they had to kill a camel or if it's like some like synthetic. I really don't know.
Or if there's some poor camel with like that hat shaped missing from his side, like
Right.
they had to shave from. Well, it's probably grown back now. So that's not something you ever plan on, like having a replica that you sell or anything online or anything like that?
No, I mean, honestly, I think the price point is a little bit too expensive for,
I would imagine.
you know, yeah, I mean, hey, I don't want to brag or anything, but I got the finest quality you can find in a hat.
Yeah, no, you got some
And,
drip. That's some serious drip there.
Yeah. And the, but the one that you're wearing is like, that's the one that we want to get like millions of people wearing, because it is something that's like within reason that we can get, mass produced in a sweatshop somewhere. And, not to say that you're a lower class of person.
No, but it's affordable. You can afford it.
That's the word I'm looking for.
It's affordable. We can afford it. It's helping some, Vietnamese family, some poor, Malaysian kids got a job finally. Right. Like it's helping everyone. So it's a good thing. Yeah, I would say, especially if that's camel hair, that's probably quite a price point.
How many camels must we kill before people know that taxation is theft?
We won't rest. We'll kill every damn camel on this planet until you people recognize that taxation is theft. So do you remember our conversation about ducks?
I can neither confirm nor deny the allegations.
Okay. If you do, how much did that change your life?
Well, it definitely changed my Google history the next day.
Something I won't repeat online. All I want to say, guys, is that taxation is theft and duck mating is rape. And if you Google, maybe don't Google it. Go on DuckDuckGo. Ironically, go on DuckDuckGo and I guess search for duck rape. And it's not pretty.
And afterwards, you can follow it up with something a little bit more libertarian, like whale rape.
Like whale rape. And speaking of which, I have John Mcafee is going to be on. Well, we don't have an exact confirmed date, but in about 2 weeks, he's going to be on. And
give him my regards.
I will do it because you were on his team, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I will definitely. I will bring you up. He could afford that hat. He's someone who could afford that hat.
He could.
So we've got some follower questions. The first one is, what would the first 100 days of a Berman administration look like?
So the very first thing we're gonna do, the first couple days. I mean, I'm the kind of person, like, I'm just gonna be like, yeah, swear me in. The band's still gonna be playing, and I'm gonna be like, get me the hell out of here, get me to the office, let me start signing pardons,
right,
and get people out of prison. Nonviolent drug offenses, nonviolent tax crimes, a lot of that crap. We need to get people out of prison.
Right.
Descheduling all of the drugs from all the fun drugs from the DEA's schedule.
Only the fun ones.
Only the fun ones. Yeah, some of the not fun. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Get rid of the whole thing. Whatever.
Right.
We'll take a vote. We're gonna start deregulating the FDA, which means we're not going to prosecute people who are operating outside of the FDA's rules, so that we can allow a private organization to form that can do the FDA's job better and cheaper and actually get drugs to market that are going to save people's lives. We're going to shut down the DEA completely, the Department of Education completely, the ATF completely, the IRS completely, and a couple others. And we're going to start looking into, the NSA is on that list completely.
Yeah.
We're going to start looking at, what we can do to really start downsizing the FBI until it's nothing left. And I know some libertarians are like, why wouldn't you just get rid of it on day one? Well, they actually have a lot of systems in place that, if we transition to private organizations, would actually be really useful in helping local law enforcement find real criminals like
Actual
rapists
criminals.
and murderers,
Right,
which
right.
like, hey, that's a good thing, right?
Right.
It just shouldn't be in the hands of government. And actually the same thing with the NSA, although the NSA, like, they can be shut down immediately. They just have a bunch of servers that need to be wiped and we can auction them off or do something, right?
Right.
So yeah, there's some fun stuff.
I was going to say that would be a pretty aggressive 100 days, so that you can probably stop it at there, because that would be a lot. So that would be very good. Next question is, how do you feel about this is a question that gets asked of almost every guest that comes on, that's related to the Libertarian Party. How do you feel about the inclusion of libertarian socialists and anarcho-communists and people like left libertarians into the party?
So I've had some conversations with some of them. I've had some on my show, and they're, you know, I think at their core, they're good people.
Mm-hmm.
They're, you know, some of them like the idea of communism, but the anarcho-communism is always really interesting. And I've tried to push them to, you know, what's the point? Actually, I'm going to tie this back into something I said earlier in a minute. What's the point you would take property from me, right? Because that's the difference, right? Like, they want to get rid of the government, but at some point they feel like they're entitled to other people's property. And at what point would they take property? And, you know, one guy, I was pushing him like, so at what, you know, if I left my house for 10 minutes to go get groceries, would I come back and find you there on my couch?
Right.
And he said, well, no, I think, you know, if I see a house that's obviously well maintained and there's furniture and, you know, everything else, I'm not going to assume that's an abandoned house and I'm not going to take that property for myself. But if I see a house that's abandoned, the grass is overgrown, there's no furniture, he might move in. Now, what's really interesting about this is looking down in Mexico, they have a lot of squatters' rights laws, and I think the U.S. used to have a lot of this, and like, it goes back to common law and everything else,
right?
Like, you know, English and everything. So what's really interesting is, like, why not? And we have a government registry that says, you know, this property belongs to somebody, but I mean, if you abandon it, like, what's this, like, can you go to a ghost town and say, like, oh, well, this entire town is abandoned, I'm going to occupy one of these houses? I don't know why you'd want to do that, but could you do that? And is the actual owner of that house going to complain? Because there's probably still a title somewhere that says, you know, some guy 50 years ago or 100 years ago used to own this, and maybe now he's dead, and his next of kin should have legal ownership to it.
Chain of ownership.
And it's like, somebody says, hey, there's this ghost town, it's just sitting here, it's completely abandoned, I'm gonna do something with it. And, you know, maybe he builds a city, or he builds like a business, right? And he builds the next Amazon warehouse there.
Right.
Then what? The you know, the people who haven't been there for 100 years and their great granddaughters are going to come there and say, oh, well, you built that on property that we own, so that's ours. That doesn't make too much sense to me. So I get the idea, you know, like, we have to understand, we have this concept that the government's registry of property is the de facto, this is who owns it. And even as capitalists, we need to get out of that mentality, because that's how the Native Americans had their land taken away, right? Oh, you don't have title to it.
Yep.
So that means government gets to decide who gets it, right?
Yep.
You have these processes, and, like, it's, you know, why is, you know, who owns any land in California, right? Like, who decided, like, oh, am I going to homestead it? Am I going to draw a map around it? There are giant plots of land. The government owns, what, 70% of the West Coast, or of the western half of the United States?
I know they own like 90% of Nevada or something like that. Yeah.
Why? Who said they get to do that? They're not homesteading it. Yeah. Like, they just drew a circle on a map.
They just claimed ownership. Right.
It's so, like, none of this seems fair. So to trust a government roster for that, I think is completely different. So I think that conversation is really a conversation worth having. And by the way, that's what I wanted to tie into what I said earlier about doing things completely different. And people, you know, asking the question about how would we have a military? How would you deal with property rights and squatters and everything else? Well, that's dealt with completely different in Mexico than it is in the United States. And it's very interesting. And in some situations, it actually works out a lot better in Mexico. And in some situations, it works out better in the United States. So, but yeah, so these are the conversations that I've had with some of the ANCOMs. And I think it's really interesting. I don't think they're right on everything. But I think bringing that type of conversation into the mix is not a bad thing. don't get me wrong. I think there are some of them that are like batshit crazy.
Oh, and I mean, some are like tanky. Some of them call themselves Ancoms, and they're Leninists. They're not. They're forced collectivists, and I want to make that distinction between actual libertarian socialists and Stalin fanboys or whatever. Like, there's a difference.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, and one of these guys, he was like, hey, I'd really want to, like, I don't want to have to worry about rent and paying for food because I want to spend all of my time and effort in my life going around the world and helping people in different places. And I'm like, well, that's like, I can't say anything wrong with that. And if you were doing that, you'd probably get food for free along your way from the people that you're helping.
Right. If you're going around helping people, that's going to come to you anyway. Like, you're providing value to people, they're going to help you back. Right.
Exactly. And I don't think he was pushing for a tax to be able to pay for that.
Right.
Now, there are the group of people who say, well, yeah, we should get rid of the government, but while it's here, we should expand it because at least while they're robbing us, they should give us something back. And that's a totally flawed argument because basically what you're saying is since government is so big, let's make it bigger before we make it smaller. But that's always the argument that's used.
Right.
And then it gets bigger. And then, you forget the plan about making it smaller, and then somebody else comes along and says it's too big. Let's make it bigger and then smaller.
Right. Yeah.
Bigger, and it never ends.
Right, and that's actually on both sides. You'll see that. So you'll see on the left side, you'll see people go, well, we don't need a government, but while it's here, we should get UBI and Medicare for all and stuff to help us live better because they've made our lives bad. And then on the right side, you'll get some people that'll go, well, we don't need a government at all, but while there's a welfare state, they should be like stopping people from coming here. And even some of the more extreme ones are like stopping poor people from having kids so that, people can't take my welfare. And I'm like, if either of you think that this government that you're demanding be expanded is going to then turn around and grant you your rights back, I think maybe you should look at the entire history of every government ever. So the next question, you were asked at the South Carolina Libertarian Party debate who you thought was the most libertarian Democrat or Republican. Who do you think is the most Democrat or Republican member of the LP?
Man, I don't know, man. I hate questions like this because, to tell you the truth, I hate labels. Like, I mean, people ask me like, well, are you a libertarian? And I have to ask, what do you mean by libertarian?
Right.
Because everyone's got different definitions. It's really, I mean, I could probably say Bill Weld.
Yes, correct. That's actually, I have that written down. That's the correct answer.
Oh, well, I got the right answer.
Yeah, right answer.
But I mean, like, maybe he's just the most popular one. But he's not even a libertarian anymore, or is he undercover trying to convince?
He is a lifetime member of the party. So I wrote that down as the correct answer. So, I mean, if you're running in the Republican primary for president and are the Libertarian Party lifetime member, and
I wasn't a member of the Libertarian Party until a couple months ago when they forced me. So membership doesn't necessarily make somebody a libertarian.
No, but the question, member of the LP.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So no, you got you're litigating your correct answer. So you were right. So libertarians battle with the misconception of being selfish, greedy, and not.
Wait, hold on a second. You just got me with a really interesting question. Can I sue myself in court?
Yes.
And can I lose on purpose to set precedent?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry, what was the question?
The question was, can you sue yourself in court? And if, no. Libertarians battle with the misconception of being selfish, greedy, and not caring about others. What do you think is the best way that we can battle that misconception?
I think we have to understand that it's true, is the correct answer. Because, but we have to understand what that means, and that selfishness is not necessarily a bad thing. But anybody who wants to make a change to government wants to make a change in where they think the problem is because of their own reasons.
Right.
Some people are libertarians because they want to legalize weed. That's selfish because that's what they think. And it might not be because they smoke it. It might be because they're tired of seeing their friends and family thrown in prison for it.
Okay.
But isn't that still kind of selfish? Isn't it just selfish if all you want is the world to be a better place without government torturing people and throwing them in cells and killing them? That's what you want. You want to live in that world, right? So we have to understand that, well, yeah, we're all selfish, but we also have to understand that makes us just like everybody else, and that means that we just want to live our lives just like everybody else. And when we come to that understanding, like with my healthcare plan, one of the things is, it's easy for us to get Republicans because they're selfish in, I don't want the government taking my money.
Right.
So they see low taxes, smaller government. Okay, cool. So they come for that. For the Democrats, it's usually pretty hard because they say, but I want people to be healthy. I want the poor and the sick and the young and the old to be taken care of. And so all we need to do is say, not fuck the poor, which a lot of libertarians like to say. We need to say, okay, let's solve those problems.
Right.
How do we solve those problems without government? And when you start going down that path, you'll realize, oh, well, government actually created those problems. And when you start talking to people like that, I would love to fix those problems. I would love to make sure that there aren't homeless, starving children and elderly in this country. I would love that. And I would love for you to live in that country, in this country, in that way, without those problems. How do we make it happen? We get government out of the way because the government's creating all these problems. And that's when their minds just kind of explode and they're like, wow, okay, that's cool.
So this took a very Stirner-esque turn, maybe egoism slightly, where you were saying, even when we're doing things for others, ultimately there's a selfish aspect to it in that we're helping
feels good, right?
It feels good, and then we like that. So like people pretty much never do anything that is going to cause them to feel some kind of, pain or distress, like a net negative feeling, unless they're masochists, in which case it's still kind of selfish because they actually have a perverse pleasure in hurting themselves. But that's still so do you consider yourself an egoist, or is that just kind of?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. No, I was curious because that's sort of the Stirner, the Max Stirner thing of, perceived self-interest and so forth. So the last question from the followers before we go to final My Fellow Americans is what was the last non-libertarian position you held, and what made you give up on it?
The last non-libertarian. I'm trying to think. When did I give up on closed borders?
That was me too.
I don't think I've ever been for closed borders.
Okay.
I think probably the closest one would have been some form of common sense gun control back when I was a Californian, because I grew up in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
So that's probably the last one, and that was a pretty long time ago.
And it was just as part of your evolution into libertarianism that you gave up on that?
I think it was part of my personal evolution, but I think it had more to do, like, it happened before I came across the Libertarian Party and even understood what a libertarian was.
Oh, okay.
But I think it had to do with just moving to Texas, getting introduced to gun culture with, people who were like in a way that, like, broke through all the propaganda that I was used to seeing in California.
Right. You weren't just seeing bad actors with guns. You were seeing people that were just normal, reasonable people that wanted to be able to defend themselves and so forth, as opposed to guns were for bank robbers and drug dealers and, gangsters or whatever.
I don't think I was ever that. Well, maybe I was. I don't know. Yeah, but it all came from it all. Because, look, when I was 8, I shot like a 22 at a shooting range at a Boy Scout camp, and I shot a couple BB guns. And that was it. That was my childhood with guns. So everything else I knew about it came from TV.
Which is a good way to end up supporting gun control.
I remember when I was like, I don't know, I'm just guessing numbers, like 5-ish or 8, or I don't know. My next door neighbor, I was friends with, and his dad was a cop, and I went over to his house, and I remember seeing the shotgun there in like a gun cabinet.
Oh. Did I lose you? Uh-oh. Oh, boy. Did I lose you? I think I lost you. But the folks didn't lose me. You guys didn't lose me. But Dan did. Let me see if I can reconnect with Dan. Let me see if I can do that again. Okay. This show may be over, guys. About to find out. Let's see if I can invite Dan again, or if he's been kicked off. He may have been kicked off. If he has, he said his computer effed up. We will see. I'm going to see if he can get on. If not, then we'll... Oh, he's trying to get on. So unfortunately, usually, guys, I can talk about some other stuff, but we were just going to wrap up with final My Fellow Americans, and I was going to ask him... I was going to give him 30 seconds and give him the names of the other libertarian... Is that... Do my ears deceive me? Are you back? I think you're on. Hi?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you and see you. Perfect.
Okay.
All right, cool. So
That was weird.
Yeah, no problem. So
NSA.
What's that?
NSA.
Yeah, NSA. Nice try. So we have a segment now called Final My Fellow Americans. And basically what I'm going to do
that sounds terrible. Are we all going to die?
Yes. And you'll never know when. That's the worst part of it. But just because we started this at some later date, we will all die. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds. And I'm going to give you the names of some of the other people that are running for the Libertarian Party nomination for president. And you're going to tell me what you think their favorite pizza topping is.
Okay.
Do you think you can do this?
Yep.
30 seconds. It's not going to be enough time. It's not going to be enough time, but I'm going to give you 30 seconds.
To answer as many as I can?
To answer as many as you can,
okay.
And then I might still keep asking you. We really don't know. This game has no rules. This is a pure anarchy game. But let me know when you're ready, and we will start.
Hold on. Let me pull up my random word generator. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, perfect. So 30 seconds on the clock. Good luck. Ken Armstrong.
Steak.
Oh, wow. Adam Kokesh.
Gunpowder.
Ben Leader.
Revenge.
Joe Jorgensen.
Salt.
Kim Ruff.
Rainbows.
That's a good one. Vermin Supreme probably should have been rainbows.
Pony meat.
Oh yeah, that's obvious. Who else do I have here? Max Abramson.
Tactical voting.
These are terrible pizza toppings. Salt. The actual answer, by the way, for Jo Jorgensen is that she doesn't find that to be something that the voters are interested in, and she would rather talk to you about the income tax.
Okay.
So you've lost.
I mean, I'm happy to talk about the income tax.
No, as are all libertarians. So you did lose that, but you have gotten the highest score for any loser about that game, which I just started today.
Awesome.
So good job, and also I'm sorry. Dan, it's been an absolute blast having you on. I hope to have you on again soon. And also it was a blast apparently being on your show as well, I guess.
On my show, on your show.
On my show, your show on my show. It's been great to have your show on my show, Dan. So before I let you go, I want to give you a chance to give any final thoughts you want to give, any message you want to say, anything you feel like we didn't have a chance to talk about, anything you want to plug, any events that are up, anything you want to talk about. Dan Berman, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, definitely check out Berman2020.com. I have links there to all my social media platforms. Follow me on every single one because there's always interesting stuff popping up. Get on my mailing list, make a donation. If you make a donation $50 or more, we're actually giving out your choice of one of these really awesome pins over here. We've got a taxation is theft and the little me with a little hat. Just remember, you are not government property. We are not government property, and stop letting the government treat us like property, and we'll all have much better lives. That's what we're fighting for.
Very good. Thank you again for coming on. Stick around. I'm going to talk with you during the outro. But guys, thanks again for tuning in to My Fellow Americans. It was great having you. Be sure to come back next Tuesday for the Muddy Waters of Freedom, where Matt Wright and I will be parsing through the week's news like the sweet autumn cherubs that we are. And then tune in again next Thursday. I believe we haven't completely firmed up the time, but I believe next Thursday we will be having the Masters of Debate 2 from the famous Masters of Debate series. This time it will be an LNC, Libertarian National Committee chair debate between Joshua Smith, Todd Hagopian, I think it's Hagopian, and Mike Shipley, and possibly Nick Sarwark. He has said that he's not sure if he's running for re-election. But if he decides between now and Thursday, he'll be on as well. And then sometime next week, I don't have an exact time yet, day or time yet, but sometime the following week, John Mcafee will be my guest. John, I don't have a good nickname for him, but John Mcafee will be on. And so be sure to tune in to Muddy Waters Media. Thank you guys again for watching. Have a great rest of your evening, and God bless you.
They say about an eye for an eye in a time when the blind lead the blind. Who am I to deny when cry when a loved one dies? I recognize that body outside with the holes in the body that was alive. Now confined to a chalk outline. Find out how, but you never know why. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. That's my sister, mother, father, brother, son. That's one of mine. All these years I close my eyes, open up to only find I'm in line.